I'm Jo Miles and I'm really excited to have you here. This podcast is a space for conversations about creativity, culture, leadership, art and the best ideas. And I couldn't think of a better way to begin than with today's guest. For our first episode, I'm joined by Kathleen Soriano. Kathleen is a curator, writer, broadcaster and one of the most influential voices in the contemporary art world. And in this conversation we talk about many topics. Just a quick note before we begin, this interview was recorded remotely via Zoom, so you may notice some slight differences in audio quality, but the conversation itself is absolutely worth it. So whether you're listening whilst commuting, working in your studio, or just taking a moment for yourself, thank you for pressing play and being part of this first episode. Let's get into the conversation with Kathleen Soriano. Creativity isn't something that just happens in our studios or galleries. It's something that unfolds through conversation, collaboration and place. Hello and welcome to Conversations of Creativity, the Sussex Contemporary podcast where we explore how creativity shows up in different lives, landscapes and ways of working. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Kathleen Soriano, curator, writer, broadcaster and cultural leader, with decades of experience working across some of the UK's major cultural institutions, supporting artists, shaping exhibitions and leading organisations through change. Kathleen has also played a key role in bringing conversations about art to wider audiences, always with a strong belief in openness, access and the value of creative thinking in everyday life. We're going to talk about creativity beyond the studio, what leadership can learn from artistic practice and how place, particularly here in Sussex, shapes the way creativity happens. Kathleen, welcome to Conversations of Creativity.
Thank you very much.
I'm delighted to have you join us here, and I just wanted to kind of introduce our relationship and what we're doing together with the recent collaboration that's been announced with Sussex Contemporary and Hastings Contemporary. Would you mind just giving us a debrief into how that came about and the ways that we're working together to explain this conversation today?
Yeah. One of my very first jobs was at the National Portrait Gallery over 100 years ago, where I was responsible for running what was then called the John Player Portrait Award, when the artists used to win packs of cigarettes, you'll believe, that's how long ago it was, and then it became the Portrait Award more recently. So I've always sort of understood the value of bringing artists in from a much broader range or group of people that you would normally go to. So when I arrived in Hastings, I was pretty confident that I wanted to do something similar. And also when I was at the Royal Academy, of course, I was responsible for the team that looked after the summer exhibition. So I know how important those sorts of exhibitions can be to artists and also to collect people interested in art. So I knew we should be doing something like that in Hastings. And it was also about finding new ways of connecting into the really deeply creative communities in Hastings itself and Sussex more broadly. So I had this idea about doing the Open. After my years of experience, I thought, yes, we can do it, no problem at all. And then, of course, we're only 9 people at Hastings Contemporary. And then I realised that there was this wonderful organisation called Sussex Contemporary that had been doing a similar thing for many, many years with a very well-organised platform and systems. So I reached out to Jo, yourself, and immediately knew from your positivity, your enthusiasm, and also the fact that you genuinely care for artists. I knew that you would be the right person for us to work with. And with 1 month to go till the deadline of our first Open, working collaboratively, that is proving to be a good decision so far. So we're really looking forward to seeing how many thousands of entries we get for the first Open at Hastings Contemporary, put together in partnership with Sussex Contemporary. So very excited.
Very excited indeed. So thank you for succinctly putting that so beautifully. So moving on to, this is very much a conversational podcast. We tend to have the same questions that we ask everybody. So I'll start at the beginning. So firstly, kind of thinking about your personal journey. You've worked across so many parts of the cultural world, so curation, leadership, writing, broadcasting. When you look at your work now, what feels like the thread that connects all of it together for you?
Oh, that's really interesting because in a way, I often talk about how, coming from an immigrant family, my father was Spanish, my mother was Irish, it was always about hard work. It was always about putting one foot in front of the other and diligence. And I think that still informs an awful lot of what I do. It's just application, wanting to do things to a very high standard and to the best of my ability. So that is a driver. I mean, obviously, truth and beauty. I love the arts. I think they play a very important role that's been downgraded a lot over the last 15, 20 years. And I think that, I do think the arts can change people's lives. They're certainly an important part of people's lives today. But unfortunately, I think we're having to go back to a much more instrumental use of art in order to help people really understand its broadest value. I get very cross when people talk an awful lot about how it's science and technology that need all the investment, and they forget that artists are the first people who imagine going to the moon, and then it's the scientists who build the rocket based on that imagination. So it was really trying to sort of help people understand the various ways in which art can be useful or important in their lives.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because quite often we talk about creativity is often thought about can be thought about in quite a linear way. So you have to be an artist to be creative. Whereas I don't, and I know you'll definitely have shared opinion on this, that actually creative thinking is one of the greatest kind of catalysts in this world and has been over millennia. Do you think there was a moment when you realised that supporting and shaping creativity could be as creative as making work yourself? Because one of the things that we really need in times like this is advocacy at leadership level. And I think, what you're doing at the moment is really important with, working with interim directorships and working as a freelance curator across different sectors. You've really got this great overview of where we sit at the moment.
I think I do actually remember the precise moment because I started as an administrator in the arts at the Royal Academy and working in a cultural environment as an administrator for a very long time. I felt like I was right at the bottom of the pile. And through, I suppose, the praise and the recognition of the people I was working with, I came to realise actually there was still a huge amount of creativity in the way in which you managed administration and organisation. And I think the minute that switch flicked in my head, I just grew in the confidence. I mean, I don't touch a paintbrush or a pencil. I will not do any of that, partly because I'm surrounded by great art all the time and I couldn't even possibly aspire to do anything that's similar. So I feel very confident though that I'm very creative in the way in which I approach my work and my life. And with that creativity, like an artist, comes a lot of bravery. And I think bravery is an interesting thing because I'm quite a brave person in my work. I take a lot of risks like an artist or like a scientist. I'll experiment with a lot of stuff. I'll trial a lot of stuff. But actually in my personal life and also physically, I'm the biggest wimp there is. I never take any risks. I'm a big scaredy cat. But there's something about the place of work and maybe working in the cultural sector, which is all about risks and new languages and communicating. I'm much more prepared to be a risk taker and braver there.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Do you think being surrounded by the creativity inspires you to kind of take the risk in your leadership then, or do you think do you think one leads the other, or it's really symbiotic from being in that environment and observing the deep and meaningful work that contemporary artists and artists of other eras have sort of undertaken and kind of those aspirational changes we can make in society?
It's hard to know, but I think a lot of it's to do with people. like people, and I like supporting people, and I like helping people to achieve what I think they deserve. And I guess sometimes if that means recognition for the quality of what they do and what they make, that's one thing. But I think I'm also a joiner. I love part of groups, so I love having a team to work with. I love championing things. So I think in that respect, it's always been about not just about the idea of creativity and itself, but it's also about the people and the minds that are behind it and what their aspirations are. So sort of helping people realise what their dreams are.
Yeah, definitely. So at Sussex Contemporary, we're really interested in creativity. It's something that happens in many forms and contexts. So when you're talking about, that bravity that you show in your work environment and perhaps wimpish nature of, maybe not wimpish, but kind of the more kind of steady life. And I totally get that. Like in my life, I think people have this kind of impression that I'm busy all the time, but actually I'm quite boring outside of being my day-to-day job. I like walking my dog, I like gardening, I like spending time with my family. It's not always about being dynamic. Work's definitely the place where that can happen. And, where do you see creativity showing up most strongly in the work that you do, in all those different roles that you have? If you kind of looked back over the years and could say, there was a period of time that really being surrounded by creativity inspired you, and when that showed up for you.
I think it's a combination of when I'm programming. It's when I'm thinking about the rhythm and pace of the next 2 to 3 years of exhibition making and how those programs fall. So there's a lot of creativity in that, and that rhythm and pace is also about touching different audiences and working with different artists. Then the other moment is when I'm actually making an exhibition, when you're putting together all the different elements and you're trying to see what goes with what and what's the story the art wants you to tell. Not necessarily what's the story that you want to tell, but what does the art want you to tell. And then the other element of it, which I think is probably the full circle, is when I'm physically in the space hanging. I have to say, I think hanging an exhibition is possibly my most favourite activity in the whole world. It's when I'm happiest. Is making sense of objects and works in a space. If you're lucky, you're making sense of it in a space that will be so crowded with people, and that when the visitors come, that they won't be able to see the rhythm and the beautiful elegance of your hang. But it's just such a privilege, really, to hang a beautiful exhibition and just to see things sitting so on point on the walls or in the room. I love that.
It's just, I think it's not to be underestimated, though, curating and having the responsibility of presenting other people's work. If you allow, certainly for myself, I think if I certainly think too hard about that, it can get slightly, it's not overwhelming, just more uncomfortable, I would say. I think, do you allow yourself some freedoms in your curatorial practice, or are you very much, when you're talking about the planning of the strategy and of the programming, do you apply that same technique in your curatorial approach, or do you allow yourself some freedom when you're in the gallery putting the work up with your art tech team?
Oh, that's interesting, because I think because I started in exhibition organisation and working with curators, the very badly behaved curators who would always hang things and move them all around, I was just like, I'm never going to be that person. So I tend to be quite organised. I tend to know what I'm going to hang how I'm going to hang before I go into a room. Having said that, I don't think that's going to be the case with the Open, because I think there's so many that is going to be very much in the moment. But normally, I think also I've developed a really, really strong visual sense over the years. Yeah. So, for example, when I was working on the Ansel Keeper exhibition at the Royal Academy, I had such a strong sense of those galleries and how it would look. People would say to me when it was hung, oh, it must be so lovely to finally see things on the walls. And I was like, no, it looks exactly like it's looked in my head for the last 2 years. you develop, especially when you're working in a set of galleries again and again and again, like I was at the Royal Academy. You understand those rooms so well that you can see them in your head. You see where things will sit. So more often than not, I don't change things. There may be the odd sort of flip round of something, but on the whole, I think over the years I've developed. It's experience really. I've developed the need to make those subtle changes at the last minute. I've also had a number of occasions when I've had to be really fleet of foot. So I did a big Australian art survey show at the Royal Academy where I had way too many works for the galleries, and there was some very, dodgy squeezing in and moving things around at the last minute. I think there are always things that you can do better in an exhibition, and every time, even though it might be near perfect, there's always something you can get better at in hanging or in choosing your works.
And definitely when you work with a space for a number of years, you do develop an intimate relationship with the space. It's not always just about the art, it's knowing about the light, the space, the temperature of a room, the flow of how people walk through it. And there's certain things that you can and can't affect from a curatorial point of view. But I think, one of the things I've really enjoyed about many of your shows over the year is how you are actually able to kind of really analyse spaces and utilise that kind of, forward thinking nature of how to kind of really engage people in a space in a way. And this is what makes a really good curator is that you're doing it in a way that the visitor isn't aware of that. They're just enjoying the space. And I think, it does. It's definitely that's kind of years of knowledge and learning and adapting that have led to that. So, yeah.
It's about storytelling. Always about storytelling. And also it's about the brevity of that storytelling so that you're not telling people the unnecessary. So, one of the things I get so cross about is when you go to a gallery and you're reading the label and it says, in this painting, the sitter is wearing a red scarf. I can see that they're wearing a red scarf. Tell me something I can't see.
Yeah.
That always infuriated me. But that whole idea of storytelling, and I always think about it as if you're almost you're taking someone by the hand and walking them around a show. And you have to be brave in knowing that you can't tell them everything that you know in that visit. You can't, because there's just too much information. I also think you're right about getting to know the rooms, because you can walk around a space as a curator, but until you've actually hung in that space, walls you thought were key walls suddenly turn out not to be key walls for no obvious reason, but just because of the way, as you said, people walk around them, or how the visitor flow works, or where the invigilator sits, for example. So all these things are things that you learn once you've been working in the space more than once or twice, really. And I love that. I love that familiarity with a space, so that you're working in tandem with the art, the space, and the ideas. They're all working side by side. I worked with some artists at the Royal Academy who wanted to sort of bite the spaces. They wanted to sort of dominate and show who was boss. And actually, in those galleries at the Royal Academy, it never worked, because the galleries are so elegant, the proportions are so grand and so perfect. But the galleries would always win out, because, and that's actually one of the reasons why I loved working with Anselm, because when we walked around the galleries the very first time, we were talking about what you could build and what you could cover up, and he was like, "No, I will build nothing. The architecture of the spaces needs to speak." And I thought, well, you get it. You're not fighting the room, which is really good.
That's so interesting. I think one of the it wasn't an exhibition you'd curated, so apologies for referencing it, or not being one of yours. I think one of the ones in the Royal Academy that for me was incredible, but in an uncomfortable brilliance way, was the Anthony Gormley exhibition, where they kind of really challenged. That was a I hadn't expected it to be quite like that, actually physically climbing through into darkness and then out of spaces and walking into, I can't remember which room it was, but it had been that kind of expanded ball of metal that had filled, and that absolute dominance, and it was quite, Yeah, I don't. I mean, it's never left me, but I'm not sure how I'm not really quite sure how that's left me. Still, now I think about it a fair bit. But yeah, I do think it's definitely an approach you can have is dominance and changing a space and dynamics. But actually, I think what the other thing we need to do or could be doing as curators is kind of remembering that kind of the respect of the relationship with the visitor and the artist has with the space. So a lot of the institutes that you've worked with have high membership, lots of returning visitors, and like the relationships that those people have with the space and what our role is as curators and museum directors is to show them in a kind of dynamic way is really interesting.
Right though, about familiarity.
Yeah.
I think familiarity is really important as well. And not just with the exhibitions, not just with the spaces and the museums, but also sometimes with individual paintings, that we've grown to love. The number, I remember I had to take Joseph Banks from the National Portraits Gallery's collection to Russia.
Right.
And every time I see him in various places, I'm like, oh, you're okay, how are you? How are you? And I remember once collecting a De Chirico self-portrait from Venice and bringing it back to the Royal Academy for an exhibition. And to get it off Venice, it went on a barge. And they strapped it to the engine. I was very young, so I didn't know about all the rules at that time. But they strapped it to the engine. And of course, right the way to the mainland, the level of vibration was absolutely unbelievable. So by the time we opened the crate, I was convinced there'd be no paint left on the surface of the canvas.
Yeah.
And it was fun.
It was, okay, good.
But whenever I see that painting, I'm like, oh my God, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you still attached? I'm so sorry. So I do think, but that familiarity, I think, for the visitor, also instills a level of comfort and a level of security.
Yeah.
That they understand what the rules are in that space. They feel at home in that space. And I think this is one of the big problems in art galleries. Because of the TV work that I do, I have sat many hours in the makeup chair. And I remember once having a conversation with a makeup artist and saying how much I was terrified of going into shops that sold makeup or walking through department stores where they sell makeup because I just got very, very stressed, I didn't know, why are there so many colours of lipstick? Why are there so many colours of eyeshadow that I'd have to turn around and walk straight out? And she said to me, that's exactly how I feel when I walk into a museum.
Interesting.
And that was such a revelation for me because museums and galleries, that's a language. I understand the way the space is laid out. I understand the way it communicates with me. I understand the terms of engagement and what it expects from me. But clearly, a lot of people, it doesn't work like that. It has the opposite effect. It's a bit like me going into that makeup shop. So that really gave me pause for thought on how you engage with your audience.
I do think audience and artist engagement is so important, and I think one of the things that you've done really well over the years is that kind of opening up the access around and conversation around art from the artist experience when you're talking about taking artists around space wherever possible. It's not always possible, but that helping them engage with the space. And I guess, I think maybe one of the challenges that we have now in an incredibly challenging time in the UK arts sector is, what, in your experience, what do you think might help organisations genuinely connect with their people? And by people, I mean visitors that are coming in. What do you think that the sector could be doing to kind of re-engage or perhaps strengthen that engagement that we're seeing? We're not seeing the kind of visitor numbers that we have done over the past few years, and that's across Tate have talked about it. There's been studies out this year talking about the drop in visitor numbers. I guess that we're at that point where we kind of genuinely need to reconnect with people. Yeah. What do you think we could do to listen to audiences when trying to be everything else to everyone? It's quite a multifaceted role, the directorship role.
Such a difficult question, Jo.
Yeah.
I mean, as you say, the visitor numbers are down everywhere,
Yeah.
but not just in galleries, also just in restaurants, in shops. Hastings itself is really, really quiet at the moment as well. And of course, the cost of living crisis is hitting everybody's pockets, and they're having to sort of careful about where they spend their money. And people are. Someone was talking to me recently at the gallery about who our competitors were, and they were talking about some of the other galleries. And I'm like, our competitors aren't the other galleries. Our competitors are the skate park or the cinema or shopping. I went to the shopping centre here in Oxford yesterday, and it was just absolutely heaving.
Yeah.
That's the market we're not reaching, really. People would prefer to do that, and I think it's really difficult. It's about how do you make engaging with art and culture fun and interesting. It's a combination. It's partly that, and I think that's one of the reasons why we see the immersive thing sort of kicking off so well. The Instagrammable moment, making something desirable so that other people want to do it. I think, unfortunately, well, maybe not unfortunately, but I think that the luxury of art for art's sake is a bit of a luxury at the moment, and I think that art is having to become more instrumental and more tied in. Yeah. What I used to talk about an awful lot in the 80s and 90s is art that's relevant to our lives today, which is one of the reasons why at Hastings Contemporary we shifted our mission to focus on ocean futures and sustainability. Given where we are on the beach, given the fact that we're next to the largest and the oldest beach launch fishing fleet in Europe, and they're struggling, we as a sector are struggling. Unless we work together, we're not going to survive. And one of the issues that's right on our doorstep that's affecting their lives and affecting ours is climate change. So we are using our programme, our exhibitions programme and our public programme, to sort of draw more attention to that and have those conversations. So I'm hoping that having that broader, more relevant reach will allow us to speak to different communities. We've also at Hastings got the mobile studio, which is where we want to take our art out into communities that might otherwise come to us. But I think ultimately it's about understanding better what each of our different audiences want from us. And some people just want to have fun. They just want to have a good time. And we need to look at how we can do that more effectively. I don't have the magic answer.
No. I mean, I ask this question of everybody that I speak to recently, across the industry, both in my role at Sussex Contemporary, at Ditchling and the University of Brighton, and I guess I think that's quite a beautiful answer, is actually how we want to have more fun, and maybe that's more about building community, engaging those conversations. I absolutely love your mobile unit that you have. Does it in Hastings? Would you mind, for those that aren't familiar with it, would you mind just quickly describing it for us, for the listeners?
We sort of built a smaller version of the fishnet drying huts that surround us. So we built something that, think shepherd's hut, but like a darkened black wood fishing hut that is on wheels. It's got a roof. Got a door, two doors that open, and then you can make a stage outside. It's just a gorgeous little thing that you can tow around. You can have workshops in it. You can do business away days in it. We can put some art in it and take it out to some communities. We can do all sorts of things. Performances in it. So we're really just getting started with it, and it's parked on the stage just outside the gallery, and it fits in so much with the local architecture that people almost dismiss it until they see its big yellow wheels. But it's a gorgeous thing. We're very happy with it. Back to audience. That's one thing I wanted to say, which is sort of, I sort of get embarrassed about saying it because it sounds very paternalistic or sort of like I know better, but there's something in this statement. Alex Schulman, who used to be the editor of Vogue magazine, she always used to say that fashion is about giving people what they don't know they want. And to a certain extent, I think exhibition making and programming and art is also a little bit about giving people what they don't know what they want. So I think there's this very fine balance between consulting with and working with your communities to understand better what they are looking for. But at the same time, you somehow need to preserve the freedom of artists and curators to make things outside of those parameters, because that's where I think great work can actually happen, when it's outside of those sorts of rules or that sort of guidance. And when those two things come together, that's when you hit the sweet spot, really.
Yeah, there's been some beautiful moments like that over the years, and I think you're right. It's being aware of the environment, the context, the building, the artist, and sometimes you do get those perfect elixir moments where you can kind of engage with your visitors in a very beautiful way and I guess really a lot of it, is about encouraging those conversations when people visit, whether they've enjoyed something or perhaps not enjoyed something. It's that inspiration to talk about things and then go out and kind of be your ambassadors. I always talk about the community that we've built with Sussex Contemporaries very much. All of the artists that we've shown with over the years, of which there's thousands now, and they have all gone on to become ambassadors of what we do and talk positively or not positively. It's not always going to be a great experience, and that's for us to learn. But it's like, how do we as kind of people that are showcasing or creating environments for people to experience, inspire those conversations to come back again, to be ambassadorial for us, to perhaps spark that moment in a child who looks at something in a different way and thinks it excites them, and that's what I want to do. And it's quite broad reaching, isn't it, I think, when you think about it in those terms. But I often say that constraint fuels creativity. Does that ring true for you, do you think? Would you find yourself in constrained times that we're in? Do you find it fuels ideas and creativity within the sector?
I think both are true, Joe. I think constraint, I often talk about discipline, how the discipline of something, especially when it's a space, can make you more creative in with it. But I also think that a lot of artists need that complete freedom in order, so can I believe both? Is that possible?
Of course you can. You're allowed. Yeah, you're allowed. Yeah, you can have both, Kathleen. We place a lot of value on where creativity happens across coast, towns and countrysides. You've worked in many places, Australia, all over the world. I think you do a lot of kind of cultural trips. I think one of the last times I saw you were going off, was it Poland you were going? Yeah. Do you find that the places that you visit or that you work within or that you're curating about influence the way that you think about your cultural work?
Yes, I do think it influences, because everywhere I go has a very distinctive approach to how they value culture, how they make culture, and how they engage with culture, and what culture means. And what it has meant and what it means now. So I find that learning process and learning to understand it really, really interesting. I'm not sure how it's impacted on me. I suppose it has impacted on me generally in that I do look to the art to tell me the story more. I remember when I wrote my book Madam and Eve with Liz Riddell, the artist. Liz started off by saying, we need to decide what we're going to say about women artists. And I was like, no, I want to look at the paintings and then decide. I want to look at the objects and then decide what they're telling us. And I thought it was so funny that the artist wanted to start with the words and the writer, the curator, the artist wanted to start with the images. So I think one of the things I have learned from all of that time with different cultures is actually just to look at the art and see what the art tells you before you listen to anything else.
Hastings has got such a strong coastal identity, and you've already talked about engaging with the fishing fleet and how a lot of your work at Hastings Contemporary is going to be, and especially the project that we're running together and in collaboration is around the word Odyssey. And have you noticed ways that places like that shape artistic energy, or how audiences engage with placemaking, creativity and identity?
I mean, placemaking is a really big thing, isn't it, in politics alone? And the way in which we describe certain parts of the country, we've always, the north-south divide or, whatever. So place has to inform identity through and through, and especially for somewhere like Hastings Contemporary, where we don't have a permanent collection, you've got to understand what your route is and what you're coming out of. And for us, it definitely is about place. And artists work in different ways. You don't need me to tell you. Some of them are responding directly to where they're located, but other ones will be thinking much more sort of globally, and they'll be responding to issues or something from their past in a way, but and not necessarily constrained by the location. So I think on the whole, for artists, I would expect it to be fairly wide-ranging and open, but for an institution, I think it's really, really important that you are about where you're based and who you're serving, what that community is. And it was the same when I was at Compton Learning. We're very conscious of the audience around us and what they would want to see. And actually, one of the things we used to operate at Compton Learning was something that there's a wonderful museum director in Louisiana, in Denmark, the Louisiana Museum of Art, which is one of the best museums in the world. And he talked to me about something called the sauna principle of exhibition making. So it's where you have a single ticket price to enter, and you do a hot exhibition and a cold exhibition at the same time. So people come in on the hot exhibition, but then they get exposed to the cold exhibition. And so we used to operate this sauna principle at Compton Learning. So you might have Rembrandt etchings on one side of the building, which of course all our traditional core audience would love to come in and see. And then on the other side of the building, we'd have a contemporary thematic exhibition on that they wouldn't otherwise be interested in seeing. But with that particular show, we had a tiny Laurie Anderson video piece that sat on the floor that was the size of a cube. And it sat on the floor, and it was her sitting in a psychiatrist's chair chatting away. And everybody who left the building were like, oh my God, Laurie Anderson piece, incredible. And I just knew that if Icon in Birmingham a couple of years later decided to do a Laurie Anderson show, that all of those people who'd come to see the Rembrandt etchings would have gone to see it.
Yeah.
So that whole idea of broadening canon. So I've wandered off piece because we were talking about place, but that whole idea of broadening the canon and stretching people's imagination about artists was always really important to me. So that's the sauna principle, dealing for your core audience, but hopefully showing people something they didn't expect to see.
No, that's really interesting though, because especially where it's so challenging out there of trying to get people engaged. From us, we are a commercial offering, so we work sort of outside of the traditional restraints, public funded or kind of, traditional gallery models where they're just charging ticket entry and not commercialising the sales of the gallery wall. It's really interesting to kind of have that hot, cold concept. I find that fascinating and wonder if there's something in it for few ways forward for the sector. It's really interesting. But yeah, definitely. I mean, and definitely that's that kind of how you transition people on a journey, not just from where they are, where they live, where they visit, where they come and see art, but then where they might go with that, how you kind of lead them on a pathway to art and fascinating. No, thank you for sharing it.
I've always done that. I've always done that, and one of the exhibition programs that I wanted to do at the Royal Academy but never got around to doing is where you take. But I used to think about this one space where we had three big galleries. So you take three historical Royal Academicians, and you take three current Royal Academicians who were working in the same area, and then and they would nominate three students from the RA schools. So you'd have those three together. So you'd have the historical, that people would either come in because they loved Turner or because they loved David Hockney or Cornelia Parker, and then they'd see the young students' work as well. So that whole idea of bringing people in to see one thing but showing them something else has always been very much part of my thinking in a way. Maybe because it's more exciting for me as well, as someone who's making something.
Absolutely, and I think we've talked about this in my role at Ditchling a lot. Having that kind of what's the pull or what's the blockbuster kind of element of the exhibition, what's going to pull the kind of masses in. And we had a really phenomenal exhibition earlier in 2024, two great exhibitions. First was Raymond Briggs. We have Briggs in the collection, but it's not a big part of the collection of the archive there. And the second was Tadek Boitlich, and they're very, very different things, but it's that how you present those, where you find the hook in the curatorial practice of how the director interprets that, to know what the populist, it's that kind of populist element, the historical element, so Hastings has got this rich background of it's quite an interesting place, isn't it? I think when I've been since we've been talking with Sussex Contemporary, I've been visiting more and more and enjoying kind of lifting the lid and kind of poking in and digging around a little bit and discovering this kind of really quirky, fascinating tradition. Seems to be a lot of tradition in Hastings. I was at the Fisherman's Museum recently and discovered the Winkle Pickers Society and this wonderful chap who'd created a whole suit out of winkles, and then there was this society and you paid so much a year to be a member of it, and they had pictures of him in papers, and it was a real character. It feels like a town where there's a lot of character and a lot of storytelling to be told.
Everybody's got a story. Everyone has a really interesting past. That's what I find. Apart from the fact that it's very, very friendly, everyone has got this incredible back. And there are lots of traditions. The Old Town, Hastings in particular, there's this crazy bike ride that happens once a year up a very steep hill. There are festivals nearly every other week commemorating some pagan activity or other. And then, you've got this it's got a really sort of strong independent feel to it as well, the whole town. Edgy and independent, but creatively independent, So I think it makes it all the more interesting, a place to be. Yeah. And then, of course, like all seaside towns, the light is just phenomenal. Yeah. And you have weather, you have real weather. You don't just have sort of boring grey days, you have proper weather, and because of the shingle, the water is very, very clear. And one artist who lives there said to me he's absolutely convinced that the sun glistens on the sea around Hastings in a way that it doesn't anywhere else. And I thought, you must be crazy. I mean, surely the sun on the water is the sun on the water. But the longer I'm there, the more I think he's right.
He's probably right. Yeah, there was a Coast programme. I'm going to go off piece now. There was the series Coast around England. I think it was a BBC programme, and there was an episode. They were discovering Cornwall. That was on that kind of sector, and there was a episode on the light in Cornwall, and they actually got a scientist to go down to St Ives near the Tate Museum, because they talk about the light in St Ives a lot. It's another coastal, culturally inspiring place. It's Bernard Leach end up there. There's all sorts of interesting things. Barbara Hepworth. It's been like Sussex. It's kind of got this draw to it. Cornwall has, and they got a scientist down to measure the light in St Ives, and it was different. It had more blue in it. I'll try to see if I can insert that kind of link into the podcast notes at the bottom, because I found that really interesting. So I'm sure, perhaps you could engage with someone scientifically to convince that there's a slightly different light in Hastings.
Wow, that's a really good idea.
Yeah, because there is a different light about it. I mean, what strikes me mostly when I come there and especially where the where the gallery is the sense that you're quite on the edge. Like you've got the edge of the cliffs very close, the Rockanaw. You've got I can't remember what it's called, that goes up the cliff face. The vernacular, thank you. And when I was in a meeting, I came to visit the team recently, and one of the team was sharing with me how the boats land on the shingle. I mean, it's quite dramatic, and it's really enlivened. I would really encourage people to, go and visit, obviously, Hastings Contemporary, but actually to go there and experience. I mean, one of the things I've got on my hit list over the next few years that we'll be working together is to go. I'd really like to see the boats launching and landing. I think that must be fascinating. And if not a little scary, perhaps.
Well, they've been doing it for such a long time, for nearly 1,000 years. Apparently.
Wow.
I think they've got it down pat by now. But it is beautiful. It does make for the most beautiful environment. So it's as if we're surrounded by a sculpture park. They are effectively, colourful sculptures that are dotted all around us. And then, as well as the boats themselves, you've got all the paraphernalia of the industry, all the pots and everything else. And you've got these sheds, which each of the fishermen and the families own. And actually, one of the things we're aspiring to do is to place artist residencies in some of those sheds over the next few years.
Yeah.
And that whole estate, when you look down with the Fisherman's Museum and then also the Shipwreck Museum, I think it's an incredible cultural quarter.
Yeah.
It's not just culture, but it's industry as well. You know, and if you tie in the marine activities as well and the science of what's going on there, I think there's real potential for that site to be defined. You know, one of the things we're trying to do at the moment is to turn the shingle around us into a new nature reserve. So we've got lots of ideas outside of the exhibition programme that we'll be doing inside the gallery, which are really, really exciting. But it's interesting you pick up on that idea of the edge, because that is really important to us. And actually, one of the shows that I've commissioned for next year is called Edge, where the land meets the sea.
Right.
And that's been put together for us by two curators called the Land Gardeners, who curated the soil exhibition at Somerset House last year.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. Yeah, it was a great exhibition. Yeah.
They're doing that show next September, and then the following September we're doing an exhibition called Horizon, where the sea meets the sky, and that's being put together by Ariane Coek, who founded the Arts at CERN programme in Geneva. And weirdly, it's her programme that really gave me the inspiration to shift our mission by she brought arts and physicists together. And what we want to do is bring arts, the fishermen and marine biologists together. And when I look out and I see all those fishermen huts, it reminds me of CERN, because CERN is basically, apart from the Large Hadron Collider, which is underground, in the middle of this sort of 17-kilometre wide space, you have lots of these little huts in which scientists from all over the world are working on their little experiments. And so our little site is like a mini CERN, and I'm really excited about what we might be able to do in bringing together those conversations around where, you know, marine issues meet art, meet the fishermen, meet industry, meets culture. So we're busy trying to build that at the minute.
Well, that sounds, it sounds so exciting. I can't believe, you know, it's really hopeful as well. And I love that that kind of incubator of bringing the science and the arts together, like almost like a throwback to the Renaissance period in a way. You know, it's really quite gorgeous. And, you know, that thought of, you know, when you look at what's happening in Worthing, the wind farm out there, where they've put the wind turbines out there and all the energy is being pulled back to Newhaven, collected there and redistributed in the kind of the electricity system in the UK. Actually, what they've done is they've created these environments as a byproduct. And actually, if you think about actually a living environment, a working environment like Hastings, and what you could do with those, how can you create environments within those working environments? I guess it's even more of a valid question, isn't it? You already have that juxtaposition of living and working, and has been there for thousands of years, and then it's just how do you develop that in a time of rapid environmental change that we find ourselves in. And I guess, you know, that's very much something that pops up a lot in artist work and curatorial presentations and I thought Soil, again, was a really interesting exhibition, working with contemporary artists, presenting things. And that show really led you on a journey. You know, physically you had to walk upstairs and walk through immersions and be presented with ideas and concepts, and ended on quite a serious note. That was quite a serious note to end on in the exhibition. And I thought, you know, that is a classic example of how we can think about where we live, placemaking, the people that we talk to, how we live our lives, and the impact that we can have. I guess kind of beautiful in a way to think that exhibitions could be stimulating people in a way to think about changing their behaviours. That would be beautiful, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, that's what we're hoping to do. I mean, I put together some of the first climate change exhibitions for the National Portrait Gallery, and also for the Royal Academy, actually. But thinking has moved on an awful lot. And part of me thinks it's a very difficult line to walk, because there's a balance between what you have to be careful of is, as a curator, you don't use the art to tell your story.
Yeah.
So you have to be very, very sure that you're aligned with the artist. The artists aren't just illustrating a point. So there becomes a tension there. And also, I think it's really important that you're not beating people over the head with a big stick. But for example, one of the things that we would aspire to do at Hastings Contemporary is not paint a picture of how it should be or what people should do, but we'd much rather be a crucible for conversation. And we did a lovely exhibition recently, extolling the benefits of planting more seaweed, for example. But the fishermen who we work with all the time and who we love dearly, they hate seaweed. We need to be the place where the pros and cons or the likes and dislikes can all be held in the same place at the same time. We don't want to be a rule maker. We want to be the place where the conversations and the learning and the understanding can be built. And that's complicated. So we've set ourselves a really, really big task, to be honest, with only 9 people, but we're committed.
It's incredible, and I thank you for sharing that, kind of being really transparent about the number of people that are in our institutions, because it's not something that it's often talked about, and actually, it's good for people to know that actually it's 9 people leading this dynamic, creatively important space and presenting these ideas, a place to inspire, a place to think, a place of starting to think about something. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, and what I should say, it's one of the reasons why we're all sick and dying at the end of this year, because it's been a very long, hard slog, but fun. But we're also supported by an incredible team of volunteers, which, many organisations, and they are our greatest ambassadors and our greatest champions, and we're super grateful to them. We couldn't do it without them.
Absolutely, it's such an important part of the sector, isn't it? And I know from visiting Hastings Contemporary and your social media over the last year, where Sophia has encouraged some of the volunteers to talk about pieces that they love. I've loved that kind of getting to know them. That's a really joyful thing, because actually when you go in and what they're welcoming and can explain things, and you can hear opinions or kind of understandings from them, it's really joyful. I guess really coming to kind of a more reflective and encouraging kind of point of view, if there's a lot of people out there that are visitors and fans of visiting art and love coming to exhibitions, galleries, museums, people that care deeply about creativity but don't necessarily see themselves as artists or creatives, what would you want them to know about the exhibitions that you curate and put on?
I think I would want them to know and feel that there would always be something in the galleries that would touch them in some way and that would be relevant to them in some way. And when we're programming, we're always thinking about the different types of audiences, so that there's something in there for everybody. Different tastes, different tastes, different likes, different stimulations that people need. So I think that's what I hope people would realise. And if the worst comes to the worst, you can always have a really good cup of coffee. Yeah,
definitely. And you've got a great restaurant at Hastings as well, haven't you? Is it Cookie? How do you pronounce it? I'll probably say it wrong.
Coquina.
Yeah.
But more, as importantly as having a great restaurant, you've got probably the best view from a gallery in the whole of the South Coast, I'd say.
I can attest to that, actually. And yes, very good food. Cake, coffee, and a really good selection of wine and drinks as well. I can vouch for that for sure. Have spent a couple of evenings and daytimes there, and I very much enjoyed it. So, what would you say helps you stay curious and open in your own life now?
I think it goes back to that immigrant thing. Just always wanting to be better, always wanting to do better, always to get more visitors, to get more people in, and to get more people to experience what we're doing.
Yeah.
And to be successful. I think it's a real drive to be successful, and that isn't just a personal drive. It's very much on behalf of the organisation and on behalf of the artists that we're showing and the people in the communities that we're working with. Success, winning, is really important to me for everybody that I'm working with. So yeah.
That's interesting. It's something we've said at Sussex Contemporary, and several businesses I've run is actually, what is the definition of success? And we say in our missions and aims that success, it looks like success for all. So having great partnerships where it's of equal benefit to each other, where our artists get paid a high commission so they get a higher salary, where customers are knowing that they're buying from us and they're having a full circle economy, and that our suppliers are getting paid up front. It's like that, and understanding that kind of full picture is really important. I think it's something that perhaps is needed a little bit more in sector across the board. Not everybody's operating that model, and I think that kind of, when you start to think about less of it being singular departments and more joined up thinking as an institution, that's where we can potentially move forward and see kind of greater engagement with the public, I hope. There we go. That's
I totally agree.
Yeah.
That's exactly, you've expressed it far better than I can. And I think what comes down to as well is about everybody being happy.
Yeah, definitely.
I really like working in places that are happy, and trying to make a place happy and the people you work with happy, because there's joy to be had in doing these wonderful jobs that we have.
Yeah.
And to working in this field, but we're so lucky to work in this field. So that drives me on as well. Finding that happiness and making sure that other people are happy too, and that's part of that successful that you described so brilliantly.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that leads us nicely onto sort of our closing question. So I think you might have already answered it a little bit, so but I'll ask it again, because we ask it at the end of every podcast. So if creativity is something we practice together rather than alone, what do you hope conversations like this can open up for people listening to it?
I guess it's about opening up greater curiosity about what culture and creativity might mean, but also opening up a curiosity to go and engage with a little bit more. That's what I hope.
That's lovely. So, coming up for Hastings Contemporary, at the moment you've got 3 phenomenal exhibitions on. Sophie Barber, Isabel Rock, yes, who I'm who's also joining us as a judge on Odyssey, very exciting, and Michael Landy. Michael Landy, yeah.
Funnily enough, Sophie Barber, I really mentioned earlier, she was inspired to paint by going down to St Ives every summer for her holidays. So I think that light.
We can definitely ask her if the light made a difference. So you've got 3 great shows on till March, then straight into Odyssey.
Straight into the Open, yeah.
Yeah, wow. And then what comes after Odyssey? What's your next exhibition that's on at Hastings?
We are working with a Brazilian-German artist who lives in New York called Janaina Chape. She's essentially an abstract artist, but she responds very much to place. I'm really desperate to see what she makes, because she came to Hastings on one of the stormiest, rainiest days, and we walked around the foreshore. We were all absolutely drenched by the time we got back indoors, but she loved it.
Wow.
And her name in Brazilian actually refers to a mythical sea creature. So she's very interested in all the old stories about mermaids and sirens and all of that. So we'll see what comes out of that. And then we are also pulling together a rather nice little Henry Moore and Lucian Freud exhibition around the subject of family. And then there'll be one other contemporary artist who I'm talking to at the moment. So that's our summer programme. And then, as I said earlier, the winter, it will be Edge, where the land meets the sea. That's a contemporary thematic show.
That sounds fantastic. What a year of programming. It's like a real journey in itself. Thank you so much, Kathleen. Is there anything else that you'd like to say about Hastings or Sussex? Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you want me to add in before I edit? No, okay. I'll do just a little outro and then I'll close. So thank you so much, Kathleen. It's been a real pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for taking the time. You've been listening to Conversations of Creativity, the Sussex Contemporary this first episode of Conversations of Creativity. And thank you again to Kathleen Soriano for such a thoughtful and inspiring conversation. Before we wrap up, I'd like to mention a few opportunities currently open to you. Kathleen and I spoke about Odyssey, the open call, developed in collaboration with Hastings Contemporary and Sussex Contemporary. This closes on the 18th of January 2026. Head on over to our website, click on Artist Opportunities and click down onto Odyssey to learn more about this project. Make sure you get your entries in. We also have Efflorescence, another open call opportunity for exhibiting with us. This one closes on the 31st of December and the exhibition opens in February over in New Haven. In January, our next The Business of Art workshop is coming up. In fact, we have two: planning your creative year and how to price your work, both essential to building successful creative practice. Head onto our website, click on the Business of Art. Full details of all our open calls and workshops are on the website. Thank you for being here at the very beginning of this podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please sign up, subscribe, share, and or leave a review. It really helps more people find the show. I'm Jo Miles, and this has been Conversations of Creativity. Until next time, stay creative.